and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
This House is in session. Minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday, March 20th, 2024, Tuesday, April 23rd, 2024, and Tuesday, May 7th, 2024 to be confirmed. Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be confirmed.
Question is that the aforementioned minutes be confirmed. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby confirmed.
Announcements by Your Honor the Speaker. Messages from Her Excellency the President. Petitions, papers.
Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am commanded to lay the annual report and audited financial statements of the Student Revolving Loan Fund for the year ended March 31st, 2023. I'm also commanded to lay the 2023 annual report and financial statements of the Central Bank of Barbados, as well as the report on the Barbados General Election 2022.
government notices, private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees.
I wish to inform the Honourable House in relation to Standing Order 60.9 as it relates to the selection of committees of the House. Previously, when the Honourable Leader of the Opposition was a member of the other side of the government, he was an ordinary member of the PAC, Public Accounts Committee. Having now become a leader of the opposition, a vacancy has arisen in relation to a member. And Standing Order 60.9 allows for the nomination of another member to fill that vacancy on the committee. Honourable Leader of Government Business, you can nominate a person to fill that vacancy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I therefore beg to nominate the Honourable Member for St. James South to be the additional member to serve on the Committee of Public Accounts.
May I second that, sir?
The question is that the Honourable Member for St. James South be now a member of the Public Accounts Committee. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. That member is so selected.
First readings of bills, statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 20, 42, subsection 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
The question is that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Revert to first readings of bills, sir.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the first reading of the Barbados Blue-Green Bank Bill 2024.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a first time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. Government business is the order of the day.
Order number 7, in the name of the Honourable Minister of Tourism and International Transport, to move the second reading of the Shipping Domestic Vessels Bill 2024.
Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In speaking on the mentioned bill, I want to take this opportunity to thank the officers from the ministry and representatives, including senior management from the Barbados Port Inc., who are here with us this morning in this very august chamber. Mr. Speaker, as you will well imagine, this is a highly technical piece of legislation for which perhaps some people may say have no local standing. But suffice to say, Mr. Speaker, it is a very technical aspect, and I want at this point to thank all the officers within the ministry, like I said, who are here with us, and the port, of course, who will certainly and have worked on the preparation of this bill. I also want to thank the officers within the Office of the Attorney General, and particularly the draftspersons, who would have worked laboriously on this particular bill. Mr. Speaker, the importance of this bill cannot be understated. In fact, the Shipping Domestic Vessels suite of laws will usher into Barbados a new era in terms of how we look at the operations, not only in marine operations, but how we build out this sector to contribute in no small measure to the economic viability not only of ports, but also to support economic activity within our country. In fact, the domestic vessels contribute in no small measure to the economies of a number of persons within the small to medium-sized businesses. And I take particular reference to the fact that they're also responsible for and assist us with generation of income in households. They also take the opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to help us with our coastal infrastructure, and they also help us in respect of marine tourism for not only tourists, but also locals alike to engage in water sports activities. And I dare say that the small vessel sector in Barbados remains a tremendous asset and certainly has that value space within our community, and requiring, of course, industry stakeholders to jointly share in the responsibility of managing the natural, the human, the social and physical, and of course, not to be forgotten, the financial assets of this critical small vessel sector and value chain. Mr. Speaker, the shipping domestics legislation as proposed will certainly encourage sustainable livelihoods, and the approach should be outlined when I go through the bill in detail this morning. The law, of course, encourages us to protect the natural assets, that is the marine environment and marine living resources upon which the small vessel sector and water sports industry depends. And of course, it strengthens and promotes continued development of our human capital, the knowledge, the skills, and which I will go into a bit detail in terms of what we're doing in respect of training and development of seafarers in this sector. It also recognizes the importance of the social asset, the formal and the informal groups and their contribution in terms of networks and relationship within the small vessel sector and, of course, the water sports community. It is also going to create an enabling environment for maximizing the financial assets to be generated from incomes through national income. But let me first of all, Mr. Speaker, take you and give you a brief background as to why we are moving to the Shipping Domestic Vessels suite of laws. The existing Shipping Act, which is CAP 296, since its enactment in 1994, regulated both large vessels, and those are vessels above 150 gross tons, and small vessels 150 tons and below, as well as water sports activities via the soon-to-be-completed and replaced 2024 Shipping Water Sports Regulation. The Shipping Act, CAP 296, was, however, found to be inadequate, as it did not align with the international maritime standards, and certainly didn't have an adequate framework to support the holistic development of the small vessel sector and, of course, water sports activity. You will recall, Mr. Speaker, and I've said it here before, that in 2018, there was an audit by the International Maritime Organization. That act, would have requested and required us to update our legislation. And as I would have done when we introduced the FAL legislation earlier this year, we are now moving to continue our work with the suite of legislation required to update our IMO standards and to bring a more modern approach to legislation, considering the changes that would have taken place since 1994. And of course, during the IMO audit, it was observed that there were areas of policy and legislative development that were necessary and that were required, of course, in accordance with IMO standards. And we have to pay attention to these standards because shipping is big business, but it also involves a number of elements that we require to protect our natural environment, protect workers who are at sea, as well to build out this area, as I will discuss later, as an opportunity for us to generate even more economic activity. So against all of that, that is why the government took the position, a policy position, to ensure that the shipping domestic vessels suite of legislation would be in place. Apart from remedying the legislative related deficiencies with specific reference to vessels and on domestic voyages, the shipping suite of laws will also provide, Mr. Speaker, the enabling conditions, of course, to support livelihoods and reliant on water sports and, of course, the community, and will, like I said, generate even greater benefits for Barbados. The regulatory framework is also designed because this suite of laws will obviously tailors to a regulatory framework for the continued sustainability of Barbados's marine sector, in particular, in this case, the small vessels sector. The laws will certainly ensure that we effectively regulate Barbados registered small vessels, wherever they may be, and of course, foreign registered small vessels when they are in Barbados's waters, consistent, of course, with the International Maritime Organization standards. The law, as it relates to the bill this morning, sorry, Mr. Speaker, is specific to 24 meters in length or less, or 150 gross tons or less. Now, vessels within these measurements, of course, Mr. Speaker, are classified within the International Maritime regime as small ships, or some people say small vessels. And I think the distinction is very important for us to know, because as we speak to this later on and we go through the legislation, the proposed bill, sorry, it is clear that we have to separate. I will also make it clear that this is not about the fishing industry, and I will come to that a bit later in my presentation. So that the change that we are making today is to ensure that the small vessels are not placed in a position as they would have been placed under the onerous responsibilities and requirements for larger, what we call merchant vessels. So this is significant because in the Shipping Act that currently exists, Cap 296, there's no clear definition, Mr. Speaker, or delineation between many of the requirements for smaller vessels as distinct for the larger merchant-type vessels. And that is one of the principal reasons why we are making this change. So it's to reduce that onerous requirements that currently finds itself within the Shipping Act, Cap 296, placing a higher degree of burden on the smaller vessels who are not as big, say, as the merchant vessels. The Shipping Act, of course, will be repealed and replaced as soon the soon-to-be-laid merchant shipping suite of legislation is enacted. The Shipping Domestic Vessels Bill, Mr. Speaker, will be, of course, comprised of one bill, as we know, but it will also have 7 subsidiary instruments known as regulations. We will have, for example, the Shipping Domestic Vessels, Small Commercial Vessels Regulations. We will have the Shipping Domestic Pleasure Vessels Regulations. We will have the Marine Facilities Regulations, the Mooring Regulations, the forms, fees, water sports orders that will accompany this bill. Mr. Speaker, but if we go to the bill sets out the objects and reasons, and those are contained in the bill that honorable members have before them. But when we look at Part 1, Clause 3 of the bill, the purposes of the bill, as it clearly indicates, is to provide for the registration of small vessels and water sports devices. It's going to regulate the marine activities of domestic vessels, water sports devices, small vessels operating within Barbados's waters, of course. It is going to have an element of the inspection, surveys, and safe operations of vessels, moorings, and maritime facilities. We obviously want to promote and maintain higher standards and conduct of competence of persons operating domestic vessels within our space. We'd also provide for the effective enforcement of safety of life at sea in the conduct of the vessel. And of course, we are seeking to protect the maritime environment from any adverse impact of vessel-related activities. Certainly, Mr. Speaker, the bill aims to ensure that vessel-related and water sports activities are conducted in a safe, secure, and sustainable manner. The bill also paves the way for the existing shipping section of the ministry that I have the honor to lead, the Ministry of Tourism and International Transport, to be rebranded as the Barbados Maritime Transport Administration, the BMTA, and the roles and responsibilities of the BMTA are clarified in relation to the specific activities under this bill as it pertains to the domestic vessels and other pending suites of shipping legislation as it pertains to international standards. Now, Mr. Speaker, and I really have to stress this, I referred to it earlier, that the Shipping Domestic Vessels Bill does not apply to fishing vessels, as fishing vessels have their own separate regulatory regime under the coming Sustainable Fisheries Management and Development suite of laws, which we brought to Parliament by the Division of Blue Economy, for the Honourable Member who will bring that from the Ministry of the Environment and National Beautification. So the bill at Clause 5F explicitly excludes fishing vessels, and I want to make that very clear, Mr. Speaker. Clause 5F of the bill explicitly excludes fishing vessels. The shipping domestic vessel suite of laws will apply to small vessels like jet skis, the wave runners, the coastal cruisers, cabin cruisers, catamarans, and other similar craft. And again, we are aligning, as we rebrand our division within the Barbados Maritime Transport Administration. Again, that was one of the things that we have to do to align ourselves with the International Maritime Organization. Clause 7 of the bill, Mr. Speaker, also speaks to the interpretation of sections in respect of the BMTA and how that will run. Clause 8 of the bill sets out the powers of that Maritime Transport Administration, which corresponds to the administrative and the regulatory oversight requirements of the International Maritime Organization. Mr. Speaker, the renaming of the shipping division obviously is one of the goals that we have to accomplish as we accelerate the development of maritime administrative affairs in Barbados, and obviously the infrastructure as well, to ensure that we effectively manage maritime resources in Barbados. Mr. Speaker, the administration, I have spoken to the administration, and that's contained in Part 2 of the bill. If you go to 7.1 all the way through, it sets out, for example, we will have a Director of Ocean Affairs. It talks about the role of that person. But when we go to Part 2 of the bill, in respect of the general operational requirements, and this obviously deals with what we have to deal with in respect of the operations of a vessel. And it's very important, Mr. Speaker, that we deal with this, because the registration of a vessel does not only grants a vessel its nationality, but it also subjects the vessel to international maritime laws, including those in Barbados. And there are issues relating to when a ship has given Barbados becomes a flag state, or of course a flag state of a foreign country. So that is all contained in Part 3, clauses 13 right through to 28. It speaks, for example, that there is a requirement, and there has been, but we are formalizing it, for a person who's operating a domestic vessel or a small vessel in Barbados's waters, that they must have the relevant insurance for that craft. It is also important to know at clause 14.5 that if a person refuses to insure or provide or satisfy that there is insurance for a small vessel or another vessel in Barbados within the definition, and that person clearly would be contravening the act and would therefore have to find themselves, if they are liable on conviction, to a fine of $50,000 or to an imprisonment of 3 years or both. It is important, Mr. Speaker, that I stress the importance of this because, as we know, we have a number of small craft operating in our waters, and if for whatever reason there is an accident, we have to ensure that these vessels have the required protection because you never know if they can injure human life, cause loss of human life, or damage to existing small craft within Barbados's waters. It is important that we follow this path and that we ensure that all vessels are insured in this space. Mr. Speaker, it is also important to know that at 17.1 of the bill, it speaks to operating an unseaworthy vessel. Every vessel operating within Barbados's waters must be seaworthy, and I'll come to that a bit later in the legislation. But it also sets out at Clause 20 that no vessel, water sports, or craft or water sports device shall be imported for the use or operation in Barbados without the written approval of the administration. And that is important, Mr. Speaker, because we need to know what is coming into Barbados. We have to know the speed. We have to know several other factors that are required in respect to accountability and, of course, measuring liability. Of course, there are instances that we have to mitigate against, including fraudulent or misleading information in respect of persons providing fraudulent or misleading information in respect to the application to import a vessel into Barbados, a water sports craft or other sports device, that there are going to be sanctions as well. Mr. Speaker, it also goes into detail at Section 24 of the bill with respect to maintenance and modification of the vessel. It sets out that the vessels must be maintained and operated in accordance with the manufacturer's specifications and the international maritime standards. Now, many may ask, for example, why is this necessary? It is absolutely necessary because if you don't maintain a vessel, if you don't maintain a car, it's possible that the vessel could break down. And then when the vessel breaks down, perhaps it can go astray. And it depends on what happens. It could also cause us serious problems in respect of Barbados coastal waters. And as a very tourism-reliant economy, it is important that we have these measures safeguarded in order to ensure that we do not spoil our beaches and create major environmental problems for the country. So I don't think that we need to go beyond that, Mr. Speaker. It sets so very clearly what is required, and obviously, if you're registered for this, and if you conclude the registration process, then you have nothing to worry about. Mr. Speaker, I also believe it's necessary that I talk a little bit about the intended use of the bill in respect of the ILO standards with respect to persons who are likely to be deemed competent to operate and certainly working on small craft in Barbados. The ILO makes it very clear that no person below the minimum age shall be employed or engaged to work on a ship. Regulation 1.2 also sets it out very clearly, where it specifies that the age 16 as a minimum, and accordingly the age of 16 has been specified into the Shipping Domestic Vessels Bill. Of course, the ministry will continue to research and develop regulations necessary to ensure that persons who are learning to swim and they have for recreational purposes, once they're accompanied by an adult, that they can also participate in sailing and those relevant activities. Mr. Speaker, I also want to reiterate that the requirements, operating requirements for small craft, for a small vessel, relates to a vessel of 150 gross tons or below, and of course, they have to be, as I indicated earlier, registered in accordance with the requirements of the bill. The other factor, Mr. Speaker, is that vessel operators must be competent. And that's very important, again, because if you don't have competent operators of vessels, you could create a major problem. And I spoke to the issue of insurance and, of course, seaworthiness that I will come back to a bit later. Mr. Speaker, as we continue the issue, if we go to Part 4, registration clauses 29 through 83 of the bill. The bill, of course, sets out very clearly the requirements for registration. It sets out, for example, the vessel marking requirements. If you look, for example, at Clause 33, it makes the point in the bill that no foreign registered small vessel shall be registered as a domestic vessel in the Register of Domestic Vessels. The reason for that, Mr. Speaker, is that you have vessels who are traversing the waters. They have a foreign flag. They're not registered here, and therefore we can't count them as part of the domestic registration process. Of course, the bill at 35 will set out very clearly that vessel owners shall ensure that the vessel complies with the following vessel markings. It is important, Mr. Speaker, that the name of the vessel is marked on each of the bows with respect to the name, the port registry, the vessel registration, and of course the number denoting the registration of the tonnage. That is absolutely necessary because we've made the point that they have to be 150 gross tons or less in order to be classified as a small craft. When we go further, Mr. Speaker, and I'm going to take you, I'm not going to go through every salient clause within the legislation, the proposed legislation, but I will, of course, speak to some areas where we believe is absolutely necessary. At Clause 69 of the bill, it makes it clear that there's what we call the bareboat charter in registration. The bareboat charting, or demise charting as some people refer to it, is a process whereby the vessel of the registration of a vessel with its permanent registry may be temporarily suspended to enable temporary registration of the vessel in another jurisdiction. Of course, once the charter takes possession of the vessel, the charter becomes entirely responsible for the vessel, and this means that the charter is accountable for the vessel's crew, the fuel, the insurance, maintenance, and the like. And in exchange for the use of the vessel owner will receive a daily or weekly stipend. And that as it relates to boating charter in. There's also, if you go to Section 78 of the bill, it speaks to bareboat charter out. That's obviously the reverse of charter in, where Barbados registered vessels can temporarily suspend the Barbados flag and temporarily register and operate under foreign flag, provided charter activities are done in accordance with the legislation. Of course, bareboating charter activities will continue to support maritime economic growth and gives vessel owners the latitude to operate their vessels within a specified time. Clause, if you go to Part 5, Mr. Speaker, Part 5 sets out and details the regime for the operation of Barbados registered vessels. Of course, a requirement here as set out at Section 5, specifically at Clause 85, where it says that subject to this act, no person shall operate a vessel of any class or description unless he is the holder of a Barbados small vessel operator's license authorizing him to to operate a vessel of that class or description, and that no person shall be employed or permit a person to operate a vessel of any class or description until the person he employs or permits to operate such vessel is the holder of a license authorizing him to operate that class of description. Of course, there will be a Barbados Small License, Barbados Small Vessels Operator's License. It will be required for operators of Barbados registered small vessels, regardless of the class or description. And the license, pretty much, is the instrument which should be evidencing that a person has the requisite training and or experience and can competently operate a small vessel for leisure or commercial purposes. The Act sets out, for example, the categories of the small vessel operator's license. At Clause 86, it makes the point that a C1, a Barbados vessel operator's license, shall be required to operate the following Barbados registered small commercial vessels: a vessel not more than 24 meters in length, a jet ski or other water sports craft, and any other class of small vessel. The important thing to note, Mr. Speaker, is once again consistent with the policy we are, and based on the definition that we are adopted, is that a craft not more than 24 meters in length will be classified as a small vessel. It also speaks to a second class, because there are three categories of licenses that will, of course, be required consistent with the passage of this legislation. And there's also the small vessels operator's license, which is required for a vessel not more than 18 meters in length, and of course a jet ski or other water sports craft. Then there is a third category, and that category speaks to a vessel 12 meters in length, and of course a jet ski or other sports craft. Those are highlighted there, Mr. Speaker, within the legislation. And the process for application, it is very, very simple. As it notes it at 87, you have to have a certificate of competency. Of course, you have to have the medical certificate of fitness where applicable, and any other documents specified by the Director of the Barbados Marine Transport Authority. The instant issue with respect to the issuance of the license, the Barbados Small Vessels Operator's License will replace the existing speedboat driving license. Now, let me also make the point at Clause 88, where it's very clear that where a person has satisfied the requirements of an application and has paid the prescribed fee, the Director shall issue a period of 1 year, 3 years, or 5 years, a license from the date of issue. Now, the important thing, for example, if you have the small vessels C1 operator's license, that of course will, if you possess a grade 1 certificate of competency, then of course you are allowed to do so. But let me speak to the whole issue, because the grandfather clause as it exists in this particular area, because obviously there are persons who would have, from time to time, would have years of experience in this business, and therefore the concept of grandfathering, which is nothing new to us, will have to apply, because it sets out that persons who would have had the relevant experience, and it sets out that Clause 88.2 was issued a speedboat driving license more than 10 years ago, immediately before the commencement of the Act, would automatically have that right to the operator's license. So we're going to grandfather that provision in, so there's no need for those experienced persons who are in the business to become concerned in respect of the fact that they, when proclaimed, the small vessels operator's license will in any way affect them to their disadvantage. Of course, there's the issue of a license endorsement. Specifically, license endorsements, Mr. Speaker, relate pretty much to the fact that if you have training, certification, if you have our experience in small vessels, handling from a recognized institution. For example, if you are certified by the Royal Yachting Association, the American Sailing Association, United States Coast Guard, the Marine and Coast Guard Agency of the United Kingdom, or any other internationally recognized body, you will not be required to obtain a Barbados Small Vessels Operator's license, because that pretty much, based on the experience, based on the accreditation of these bodies, will, of course, allow you to be endorsed as a licensed operator in Barbados. So I thought that's very important, Mr. Speaker, because oftentimes we will have persons operating in Barbados with the requisite experience and training who come here, and therefore when they come here, they wouldn't have to, by law, once this is proclaimed, to continue to go through all those relevant procedures in respect to obtain a small vessels license to operate. Mr. Speaker, the other area which I wish to touch on in respect of the small vessels registration licensing obtains at Clause 101, the application for a Barbados Small Commercial Vessels License. A person, of course, may apply to the director for a license to license a vessel in the form and manner prescribed. Of course, it says so at 2, Clause 101, Section 2. The prescribed fee, of course, you have to have a certificate of seaworthiness, certificate of registration, of course, insurance policy. Whereas the Barbados vessel license is a license in respect of a person to operate a vessel, the small commercial vessels license is in respect to the use of a vessel as being put in or required for small vessels being used commercially, so or on a permanent basis. So what the bill is intended to do is to ensure that small vessels, if they are prepared to go the route of commercial activity, that they have to apply, of course, for a Barbados small commercial vessel license. I believe that's very clear, Mr. Speaker, in respect to what we are trying to achieve, because it is very important, Mr. Speaker, that we separate commercial activity from leisure activity. And of course, when you have commercial activities, as you know, sir, you're a lawyer, there's some liabilities that you have to mitigate, and there's some compliance issues that you have to maintain in order to operate in a matter that could be best be described as circumspect. So, Mr. Speaker, moving on, in relation to the commercial, having discussed the commercial requirements, there's also a section, and that section speaks to Clause 111, where it speaks to the issue of an intended pleasure vessel permit. Now, a person wishing to put out a pleasure vessel to temporary or commercial use, for example, on a short-term basis, particularly during crop over, for example, will have to obtain an intended pleasure vessel permit. This ordinary pleasure vessel owners and operators will only require the small vessels operator's license. However, where a vessel registered as a pleasure vessel is now sought after to be used as a commercial, in a commercial arrangement on a temporary basis, will have, of course, to obtain the intended pleasure permit in order for them to pursue their activities. So, if I may recap, Mr. Speaker, the small vessels operator's license or license endorsement, as the case may be, as evidence of that person's competence to operate a small vessel. It's mandatory irrespective of if the person is the owner of or operator of or a pleasure vessel or a commercial vessel. The Barbados Small Commercial Vehicle Vessel License only if permitting a small vessel to be used on a permanent commercial basis. And then the intended pleasure vessel permit I've just discussed only if you're putting a vessel registered as a pleasure vessel to temporary commercial use. Of course, Mr. Speaker, this will augur well for the good governance and conduct of the sector. Mr. Speaker, if you go to Part 6 of the bill, Part 6 of the bill sets out what is required in respect of dealing with the mechanics and the processes for obtaining a small vessel learner's permit. Now, of course, Mr. Speaker, there are persons like when you have to have a learner's permit for a vehicle, to drive a vehicle, and in the hope that you will obtain your license, the same thing obtains on, obviously, Barbados' waters. You have, if you are willing to so pursue and to have a license, it's important that the person who eventually has to operate the vessel is a competent person, and competency is really a key to shipping and the safety of shipping. As you know, the International Maritime Organization places a significant premium on safety and security at sea. So a person who satisfies the requirements under the learner's permit will be issued with a certificate of competency, and based on this certificate of competency, the person can apply for a Barbados Small Vessels Operator's License in the appropriate category. And I said, and I would have told the House already that there are 3 categories. I spoke to the whole issue of the grandfathering option. Like I indicated, there are several industry veterans in Barbados who would have spent years upon years, obviously, within the business with related experience. And these persons, therefore, would not have to undergo the same process as a newcomer in trying to obtain the Barbados Small Vessels Operator's License. And that is settled, like I said, at Clause 88 within the proposed bill. As it relates to the Clause 133, application to advance to a new grade of competency, the bill makes it very clear that a person may apply to the administration for a certificate of competency corresponding to the new grade of competency to which he wishes to advance. It's all settled at 133 as I indicated. It talks about the application process. But what is very interesting about this bill in particular, that the bill also creates opportunities for careers within this business. There are several careers and persons have in Barbados over time have had these careers, but to highlight new opportunities for younger persons who may wish to get into the shipping business. At 135, it speaks to about master. Of course, it sets out the qualification bar and the experience required. It speaks at 136 to board technicians. And for those of us who are not specialists in this area, we'd appreciate that you have a board master, you have a board technician, and it also have, Mr. Speaker, board manufacturers. And it says so at 138, who is qualified to be a board manufacturer in Barbados. Once you've attained the age of 16, you've logged 2 years of experience as an apprentice with a local veteran board manufacturer. You require the professional training and certification at a local, regional, or international institution as a boat manufacturer, of course, subject to the relevant procedures, then of course you can qualify to be a boat manufacturer. So these, and it is important, Mr. Speaker, because oftentimes when we are speaking to these issues, not a lot of people are aware of the careers within the sector. I recall when I joined the ministry, that the ministry had put in place mechanisms, for example, to work with the Samuel Jackman Prescott Institute of Technology, where they now have marine-related courses. And of course, more recently, you would have had BIMAC and the officers within the ministry. They're working, obviously, with BIMAC to graduate that into at a higher level in respect to the qualification. And no longer, and we want to reach the stage whereby we wouldn't have to bind certification from abroad, that will be training and developing our people to ensure that they're certified with respect to training and development. And that, of course, will reduce any foreign exchange that we have or other expenditure that we have to outlay. Mr. Speaker, in respect to Part 7, and this is a very important area when it speaks to surveys and seaworthiness and, of course, certification of vessels. And it covers it from Part 7 from 166. It goes right through to 177, outlining the vessel surveys that are required, the certification process, Mr. Speaker. It sets out what vessels must undergo in respect to the survey. And Mr. Speaker, if you go to Clause 169, it speaks to operating a vessel without a certificate of seaworthiness. And it says, subject to the Act, no person shall operate or cause to be operated a vessel without a certificate of seaworthiness. And if a person should contravene that, Mr. Speaker, then the person is liable on conviction to the fine of 20,000 or to imprisonment of 2 years or both. Mr. Speaker, now we may ask, why is this important? Mr. Speaker, seaworthiness, Mr. Speaker, not one of us will go on a vessel to go anywhere, any part of the world, if the vessel is not seaworthy. Because, as you know, the old people would have told us that the sea has no back door. And if you are out to sea and you don't have a paddle or canoe, then you are in deeper waters, and therefore a lot of things, not only you risk your life, but of course if you have cargo on it, and if you, for example, you were an oil tanker and you don't have a seaworthiness certificate, you know what could happen to you. So the Act sets up, now this is not in relation to the merchant vessels, but I thought I will bring that into the picture for the understanding of the greater risk that we are faced with if you don't have vessels that are seaworthy. But the seaworthiness certificate will be valid for a period of 5 years from the date it is issued, unless, of course, it is suspended, unless it is revoked, Mr. Speaker, and then there are procedures to follow. Of course, fraudulent certificates of seaworthiness will be dealt with at 171 with respect to the fines and the penalties that are imposed there. With respect to unseaworthy vessels, Mr. Speaker, 173, where following a vessel survey, a surveyor determines that a vessel is unseaworthy, then it sets out what is required. You shall not issue a certificate, again, that's protecting all waters, of course, and within 14 days, obviously, the surveyor should also settle and prepare a vessel survey report in respect of these matters. So the Act is very careful in its application to requirements for seaworthiness and how you deal with those vessels that are certainly unworthy of traversing Barbados' waters. And Mr. Speaker, at Part 8, 178, and from 178 it goes and it details right through to 191, It sets out the general safety duties and places the responsibility on those who are responsible for safety. For example, at 178, it sets out the duties of the vessel owner. And I'll recap some, Mr. Speaker. It says that a vessel owner shall ensure the safety of the vessel, the equipment related to the vessel, the operation of the vessel, the cargo on board the vessel, his own health and safety on the vessel, the safety of passengers, Mr. Speaker. And of course, within that, it talks about the safety of passengers on board the vessel who are in close proximity to the vessel or may be affected by his actions and omissions. Now, Mr. Speaker, you can imagine if you're on a small craft and that the owner of that craft does not follow what we settle at 178, 1 through A to F, you can imagine what will happen out there in Barbados' waters. And then we will have a whole litany of woes and concerns relating to safety, and it could cause a lot of people certain problems. But the bill is very careful to set out the general safety duties. And again, it's compliant with the International Maritime Organization's security and safety standards. And it's very important that I stress this because the International Maritime Organization places a significant premium on safety at sea. It also sets out, for example, Clause 179, the duties of a boat manufacturer. Because if you don't have the duties of a boat manufacturer included, it therefore means that somebody can go ensure that they manufacture a boat, but if it is not seaworthy, Mr. Speaker, then you're still in trouble. If it is not constructed in accordance with the approved designs, then we are in further trouble. If you don't have all the electrical components, and Mr. Speaker, the old people say water and electricity don't mix. So if you don't have that, then you'll be in a major problem, and you can cause injury, or you can even cause loss of life, not only to the passengers, but also to the crew. And you also have to ensure that all the mechanical parts are configured appropriately, sufficient to allow the small vessel to operate and function properly. So it sets out in very clear terms what is required, and then it goes on to make a provision for the boat manufacturer's certificate of origin at 180. It sets out that a boat manufacturer's certificate of origin, upon completion of the manufacture, design, commission, or construction, building, repair, or refurbishment, or the modification of the vessel, must be stated emphatically, and we have it all settled at Clause 180. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't think, with respect to the boat manufacturer, we also have the whole issue of the duty of boat masters. Again, a boat master has to ensure the safety of the vessel under his command or charge. That's at 182. The operation of the vessel, of course, I indicated, and of course, the safety of passengers. It also renders responsibility as well on boat operators, and it also has a responsibility attached to it for crew. At Clause 189, it sets out the duty of the crew in respect of the performance, in respect of safety and operation of the vessel. So you also have Clause 190, the duty of passengers, because oftentimes, Mr. Speaker, people go on a vessel, but they might believe that they don't have certain duties or responsibilities. And it says here at 190 that a passenger shall take reasonable care for his own safety, take responsible care for the safety of other persons on board the vessel, in close proximity to the vessel, or those who may be affected by his acts or omissions. And of course, passengers shall not interfere, misuse anything provided on the vessel in the interest of safety of all on board the operation of the vessel. Whether the vessel is a pleasure vessel, whether it be for cargo, Mr. Speaker, it is important that we do not allow danger to be placed at another person's feet. So, and it says so at 191, the duty of a person for personal safety and the safety of others as well. Excuse me. So that, Mr. Speaker, when you look at it, in respect to what we're doing here, it is important that we recognize that, albeit very comprehensive, the bill again aligns to international standards for safety, and we cannot underestimate or understate the importance of safety, particularly at sea. Mr. Speaker, at Clause Part 9, the bill speaks to the whole issue of the improper use of distress signals. It talks about the compliance of the rules of the road. And Mr. Speaker, you might be interested to say, well, why would the honourable member in this parliament speak in a debate to rules of the road when he's dealing with water? They might say, well, he ain't too bright, he doesn't understand what he's saying. But within the IMO, the rules of the road relates essentially to what we call the lanes and the lines and the operations that boats have to traffic and maneuver through. So that's their interpretation, not my new suggestion to be incorporated in any legislation. So it says compliance with the rules of the road, Mr. Speaker. And if you don't comply, of course, there are penalties. And it speaks to the code, the application of the code that is necessary, the operating the vessel in excess of the carrying capacity. And Mr. Speaker, it is very clear because you know you have to have a gross tonnage of 150 tons or less. But if you are operating a vessel and it exceeds that, Mr. Speaker, then when it goes below the line, then you can have significant problems. You run the risk of it going underground. If you sink and persons can't swim and you don't have the appropriate life vests and other safety equipment, then we will be caught in a lot of danger. And therefore, it's important, even though most professionals know this, it is important that we put this into the law, because it's important that persons understand that you cannot unilaterally exceed the carrying capacity of a ship or a registered small craft or beyond what is required within the certificate of registration for the vessel. Mr. Speaker, from time to time, you will have obviously maritime accidents, especially in respect of small vessels in Barbados. And what the bill sets out to do is to settle the requirements for how you deal with marine accidents. And of course, if you fail to report it as well, it also sets out very clearly at clause 196. And at 197, of course, you have at sea, you're required to have a journal logbook, and that is nothing new. You're also required to have a marine protection logbook, again, nothing new. And you also have to ensure that all the navigational hazards and the like, and damage to coral reef, of course, or improper removal or use of the buoys and navigation aids are dealt with. Mr. Speaker, if we go to clause 10, part 10, when we go to part 10, and part 10 obviously will be clauses inclusive of 202 all the way down to 214. In respect of the clauses here, you will note that the bill seeks to prevent, reduce, and control pollution to the marine environment and surrounding areas. Of course, the other honorable members in this chamber, like the honorable member for St. Michael South, who would have led a lot of work in this area when he was the minister responsible for the blue economy. And I'm sure that when he speaks today, he will wax very warmly on these matters, along with my colleague who heads up the Ministry of the Environment, whose knowledge of these matters I would suggest second to none. So I will defer on certain points to my honorable members on this side. But suffice to say that there are provisions. If you go to clause 206, it speaks to, for example, the vessel cleaning and how you clean a vessel. Because if, for example, if you're cleaning the hull of the vessel and you don't do it properly, it could result in a high level of toxic paint getting into the ocean, and therefore creating a problem within the surrounding environment in Barbados. And it sets out that how we should do it in a way that will be very environmentally friendly, and of course not to cause operators of vessels to either sand or to chop or to chip or to strip away parts within a certain area that would cause environmental damage to the ocean. So those are set out vessel cleaning. For example, we also have the whole issue of garbage management, sets out very clearly clause 2007. It talks about using recyclable containers and reusable bags for garbage disposal. The fact that you should take all measures to minimize the use of plastics at sea. It talks about not to dispose of any form of garbage into the sea, Mr. Speaker. That is very important. Again, we're very reliant on tourism, and therefore we have to not only protect the beaches for our locals and tourists, but we also have to ensure that our marine life is protected as well. And we don't want to have garbage being, wanted garbage being disposed of improperly. That is settled very clearly, and even to the point where vessels should have a garbage management plan on board, and that's contained under section clause 207.4, and it sets out what is required there. 208, it also sets out the requirements for oil and oily waste management. And if we are serious about the environment, we have to ensure that we do so. it says that a person should take all the necessary precautions to prevent and reduce and control oil waste within the marine environment. It's absolutely necessary. We cannot afford to damage our marine resources, and if we do so, of course, that will be at a significant risk. We also have sewage management, and this is very important, Mr. Speaker, because it sets out the point that no person shall discharge or dispose of sewage into the marine environment. And again, very, very, very necessary, Mr. Speaker. Again, locals use the beach, and we don't want a situation where Mr. Speaker, I think I will have to pause because obviously noise in the background.
Honourable for Christchurch South.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move a suspension for 5 minutes.
The question is, this honourable chairman be suspended for 5 minutes. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The honourable chairman is suspended for 5 minutes. No? No? No. No. Changing the yard. What's here?